Kuroboshi stood still, feeling the surge of power as the star element flowed through him. For a moment, he could sense its presence so clearly, and he questioned in his mind if this was truly the star element he had heard about. Orin and the other girl, observing him, acknowledged his progress and praised him for managing to draw in the energy. As Kuroboshi gazed up at the sky, he began to wonder if the star element had always been this abundant in the world around him. He could sense it not only from the hot spring water, but also from the trees nearby, realizing that nature itself seemed to be filled with this mysterious force. Orin explained that it wasn't surprising. Nature naturally held a large amount of star element, and this area was known for being especially rich in it. That was why the Hachi school had chosen it as their special training ground. However, just as Kuroboshi was starting to feel hopeful, the power within him vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. Confused, he wondered if the star element had disappeared. The other girl, observing what happened, noted calmly that this was expected. Kuroboshi, puzzled, asked what she meant. The girl explained what she had seen through her alpha ability, Celestial Observation Hubble. When she looked inside Kuroboshi, she saw the star element being sucked into what looked like a black hole. This meant that Kuroboshi's own alpha ability was absorbing his star element before he could use it. It was as if he was trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. The star element simply wouldn't stay inside him. The realization hit Kuroboshi hard. He began to question whether this meant he would never be able to use alpha abilities at all. The other girl hesitated, unsure what to suggest, but Orin stepped in with an idea. She suggested that they head into the hot spring, where the water was overflowing with star element. Perhaps by feeling it all over his body, something would change. The other girl agreed enthusiastically, urging them to go along with the plan. Kuroboshi was hesitant at first, still focused on his training, but the girls convinced him that even reflecting on his abilities was part of his growth. Soon, the scene shifted to the men's bath, where Kuroboshi sat in the hot spring. He couldn't help but grumble to himself, hoping the girls hadn't just suggested the idea as an excuse to enjoy the spring themselves. The mini dragon beside him soaked happily in the warm water, commenting that the star element felt wonderful. For those without talent, it said, this kind of environment was perfect, overflowing with star element and ideal for practicing alpha abilities. Yet, the dragon teased Kuroboshi, laughing at the fact that even in this perfect setting, he couldn't manage to use his powers. Annoyed, Kuroboshi gave the mini dragon a light smack on the head, telling it not to disturb him while he was trying to focus. Still, he couldn't deny the truth in the dragon's words. No matter how much star element surrounded him in the water, he couldn't seem to do anything with it. But then, a thought crossed his mind. If there was one thing he was good at, it was not giving up easily. Determined, he told himself that he would keep trying and do whatever he could to figure this out. Meanwhile, in the women's bath, the two girls relaxed while thinking about Kuroboshi's struggle. The other girl admitted that while she had suggested the hot spring, she wasn't sure what else to do. Even she could send star element, but surviving at Hachi school without alpha abilities was nearly impossible. Orin reminded her that alpha abilities were deeply tied to individual perception. This was something Kuroboshi would have to face and understand on his own. The other girl agreed, realizing that everyone's abilities were different, and teaching him her way wouldn't help. All they could do now was believe in Kuroboshi and wait, hoping he would find his own path to mastering the star element. As they spoke, both girls seemed to feel a quiet hope that Kuroboshi would find the solution he needed. Despite the difficulties he faced, they trusted that he had the determination to overcome this challenge. In the stillness of the hot springs, with the star element quietly surrounding them, Kuroboshi's journey to unlock his true power continued. The scene opens with Kuroboshi still sitting in the men's bath, trying his best to figure out how to connect with the star element. His mind is heavy with frustration. The plan to use the hot spring water, which was supposed to be full of star element and help him train, has failed completely. Instead of gathering strength, he feels weaker. The heat of the water makes him dizzy, and he struggles to stay focused. His body isn't used to this kind of temperature, and it's draining him faster than he expected. Sweat forms on his forehead as he realizes that no matter what he tries, the star element keeps slipping away. In a last attempt to sense the energy, Kuroboshi places his hand deeper into the warm water. Earlier, it felt like the star element surrounded him. He could almost touch it. But now, that presence is gone. He looks at his palm, confused and desperate for an answer. That's when the truth hits him. The black hole hidden within his hand, the strange part of his alpha ability, is absorbing the star element without his control. It's pulling in all the energy from the water like an endless pit, leaving nothing behind for him to actually use. Seeing this, Kuroboshi feels a deep weight in his chest. The alpha ability that should have been his tool feels more like a curse. It takes what he needs most, and no matter what he does, it won't listen to him. His power keeps acting on its own, turning all his efforts into nothing. He can't help but question why he was given an ability he can't even control, and the frustration eats at him. Then, just when he feels most hopeless, something unusual happens. A glowing window suddenly appears before him, hovering in the air. The system screen, the same kind he saw during the encounter with the bird seal, now displays a new message. It tells him that he has gathered more than enough star element to seal even the strongest of species. The memory of that past battle flashes through his mind, the way the system had helped him then, guiding him through when he was lost. Now, the screen presents him with a choice. It offers a powerful technique called the Star Element Jet and asks if he wants to use it. Kuroboshi hesitates for only a moment. The name of the skill is unfamiliar, but he can feel the power hidden within it. Without knowing exactly what it means, he accepts. The effect is immediate and overwhelming. A massive force bursts out from him, shaking the entire bathhouse. The air trembles with the energy pouring out of him, and ripples spread wildly across the water's surface. The force doesn't stop at the men's bath. It reaches far beyond, like a shockwave, pushing through the walls and filling the air outside. In the women's bath, Orin and Senri are caught off guard. They feel the ground tremble beneath them, and the air suddenly grows heavy, as if the sky itself is pressing down. Both girls realize something serious is happening. Their eyes are drawn toward the source. A bright, powerful beam of light shoots up from the men's bath, breaking through the roof and piercing the sky like a pillar. The surrounding forest is lit up as if by a second sun, casting shadows that dance wildly across the trees. Alarmed, Orin and Senri wrap themselves in towels and rush toward the men's side, calling out for Kuroboshi, hoping he is unharmed. As they reach the bath, they find him standing there, the last of the light fading around him. His breathing is uneven, and it's clear the event has drained him, but he's otherwise safe. Kuroboshi turns to them, offering an awkward, slightly embarrassed smile. He tries to explain what just happened, that the system had given him an unexpected chance to use an alpha ability, and without thinking too much about it, he went along with it. Both girls are left stunned. Only moments ago, they had worried about whether Kuroboshi could ever use alpha abilities at all. Now, in a single instant, he's unleashed a force stronger than anything they could have imagined. The scale of the power he released leaves them speechless. They had hoped he might make small progress, but instead, he's caused an explosion of energy that shook everything around them. The morning sun rose as Kuroboshi stepped out of his house, filled with a sense of determination. Today marked the beginning of his journey at Hachi school. and he couldn't help but look forward to what lay ahead. As he walked, a voice called out from behind, greeting him warmly. He turned to find Orin and Senri waiting for him. Orin smiled gently, noting how well the school uniform suited him, while Senri, with her usual teasing nature, made a playful remark about how scrawny he had looked when she saw him at the bath the day before. Kuroboshi, caught off guard, flustered, tried to change the subject, but Senri continued to tease, pretending not to understand his discomfort. Their conversation shifted as Senri curiously asked whether Kuroboshi could now use the star element jet at will. Kuroboshi admitted he couldn't. He explained that when the system window had appeared before, it seemed to trigger because of the excess star element around him, and perhaps there hadn't been enough of that energy since to activate it again. Orion thoughtfully added that maybe the ability had drawn in all the nearby star element at the time, which would explain why even the star element in the women's bath had vanished during the incident. That had interrupted their own training to gather star element. Kuroboshi felt guilty hearing this, but Orin reassured him with a light-hearted tone, telling him it wasn't a problem. He was a little surprised to see this playful side of her and remarked on it, earning a mock-angry but cute expression in return. The mood lightened as Orin encouraged Kuroboshi. She pointed out that being able to sense star element and use alpha abilities, even if only a little, was already a big step forward. She reminded him that now they could work hard together at Hachi school and aim to become stronger side by side. Feeling grateful for her support during his special training, Kuroboshi bowed respectfully, wanting to properly show his thanks. Orin, slightly caught off guard, commented that he was starting to act like a true Hachi school student already. Kuroboshi smiled and, as they walked, mentioned he had somewhere else to stop by first, asking them to go ahead without him. Orin tried to persuade him to stay, worried he'd be late, but Kuroboshi insisted he would make it on time. As he hurried off, Orin sighed, realizing he was still as unpredictable as ever, and Senri simply remarked that this was just like him. The scene shifted as Kuroboshi made his way to a quiet hospital room. He sat beside his mother, who lay still in a coma, her face peaceful but pale. Gently, he spoke to her, sharing everything that had happened over the past week. He apologized for not visiting sooner, explaining that so much had occurred in that short time. He told her about how he had been accepted into Hachi school and about his first steps toward mastering alpha abilities. There was a note of hope in his voice as he promised to use these abilities not just for himself, but to help others too. Before leaving, he softly reassured her that he would return again soon. With that, he stood, took one last look at her, and left the room, ready to face the new day. The mini-dragon, always a quiet observer in Kuroboshi's life, felt a strange sensation for a moment, like something unusual had passed through the air. But just as quickly as it came, it was gone. The creature brushed it off, thinking it was probably nothing important, and certainly nothing that concerned him. Meanwhile, Kuroboshi was caught up in his own struggle. He was running at full speed, his heart pounding, realizing with growing panic that he was going to be late on his very first day at Hachi school. The realization that the school had moved to a different building added to his stress, but finally, the new school building came into view. He felt a small sense of relief. If he hurried just a little more, he thought, he might still make it in time. But just as he pushed himself for that final stretch, Kuroboshi collided with someone. The impact was sudden, and he stumbled slightly before steadying himself. When he looked up to see who it was, his heart sank. Standing before him was none other than the bully he had met during his earlier trials, the one who had once mocked him and treated him as worthless. The boy, now wrapped in bandages from injuries that hinted at battles past, glared at Kuroboshi with a mix of anger and wounded pride. His voice was sharp, accusing Kuroboshi of looking down on him. The sight of Kuroboshi in the Hachi school uniform seemed to sting the bully's pride even more. Inside, Kuroboshi felt uneasy. The bandages, the anger in the boy's voice. He could sense the bitterness and frustration the other carried. Without wanting to escalate the situation, Kuroboshi quickly offered an apology, explaining that he hadn't meant any harm or insult. He hoped that, now that he was part of Hachi school too, they could stand side by side as comrades and face future dangers together. But those words didn't have the effect he hoped for. Instead of easing the tension, they seemed to make things worse. A painful memory flashed through the bully's mind, the moment when fear had gripped him during that deadly encounter, turning him into someone who had been powerless in the face of danger. Kuroboshi's words, meant as kindness, felt to him like pity, and that wounded his pride even more. The idea of being seen as weak, especially by someone he once mocked, was unbearable. With a deep sense of frustration boiling over, the bully refused Kuroboshi's offer of friendship. He couldn't bring himself to accept the idea of standing as equals with someone he had once called useless. His pride, already fragile from the humiliation of past failures, couldn't take the idea of being seen as a comrade by someone like Kuroboshi. In his anger, he summoned his power. A large ball of fire formed in his hand, its heat pulsing in the air around them. The fire seemed to mirror the rage burning inside him. He couldn't shake the belief that everyone was looking down on him, mocking him behind his back. Now, faced with Kuroboshi standing there in that uniform, it felt like the final insult. The fireball grew larger as the boy's fury grew, and it was clear he intended to release it, letting his emotions drive his actions. His mind, clouded by anger and hurt pride, no longer saw reason or restraint. The scene burst into action as a fight broke out between the first-year students of Hachi school. Tension filled the air, and the sounds of shouts and clashing abilities echoed through the school grounds. Oreen, moving through the crowd, introduced herself as part of the student council, asking those blocking her path to let her through so she could see what was happening. Her eyes widened when she finally spotted what was going on. The same boy who had been hostile toward Kuroboshi before was now attacking him. A huge fireball burned in his hand, and it was clear he wasn't holding back. Kuroboshi seemed to be trying to avoid the attack, but the bully was relentless. Oreen, caught off guard by the dangerous situation, called out in concern, questioning what was going on and why this was happening on the very first day. Before she could do more, Senri suddenly appeared behind her and gently covered her mouth, apologizing for surprising her. Senri's tone was light but curious, saying they should observe the fight a bit longer. Though Oreen was worried, pointing out that the attacker was an A-rank student with real combat experience, Senri brushed it off, suggesting that if Kuroboshi planned to stay at Hachi school, he would eventually need to prove his strength anyway. The situation grew more intense as the bully launched a massive wall of fire, aiming it directly at Kuroboshi. The heat shimmered in the air, and the fiery barrier closed in. The bully taunted Kuroboshi, mocking him for running and calling him powerless. He attacked again, sending waves of fire toward him. Kuroboshi, feeling the pressure, looked desperately for a way out. His thoughts raced as he asked the mini-dragon inside his mind what to do. He felt cornered, realizing that if this kept up, he wouldn't stand a chance. His attempts to summon Jet, the powerful ability he'd used back at the hot spring, failed. It hadn't responded since the training camp, leaving him feeling helpless. He wondered if there was any other way. Then, Kuroboshi noticed something, the black hole that sometimes appeared in his palm. The bully, growing more confident and cruel, prepared another powerful strike. He was eager to end the fight, calling Kuroboshi nimble but pointless, and declared that this time Kuroboshi would be reduced to ashes. His hands glowed with energy as he launched his strongest attack yet. a massive, blazing fireball known as Mega Flare. The fire roared through the air, its heat intense enough to make the crowd take a step back. Thinking quickly, Kuroboshi moved toward the oncoming fireball, focusing on the black hole in his hand. He aimed his palm at the fireball, hoping to absorb the flames and turn the enemy's strength against him. But as the fireball neared, the mini-dragon barely dodged the burning mass. The fireball smashed into Kuroboshi's hand, but instead of being absorbed, the power overwhelmed him, knocking him to the ground. The crowd gasped, and both Orin and Senri shouted his name in panic, watching as he fell. Some of the students watching tried to encourage him, shouting for him to get back up and show some determination. Lying there, dazed and hurt, Kuroboshi's mind raced. He felt frustrated and defeated, wondering why the black hole hadn't worked. His plan to absorb the fireball's energy had failed, and now he was paying the price. The mini-dragon, furious that the fireball had come so close to hitting him, scolded Kuroboshi harshly. He warned him that if he tried something like that again and put him in danger, he wouldn't hesitate to strike back. As Kuroboshi tried to process what had gone wrong, he realized something important. Those flames had to be fueled by star element. That meant, in theory, his black hole should have been able to absorb them. The problem wasn't with the flames themselves, but perhaps with his control or understanding of the ability. The mini-dragon, watching Kuroboshi struggle, gave him a dark and unsettling offer. He suggested lending Kuroboshi his power, saying that he should think of it as an alpha ability. But the mini-dragon's true nature showed through in his words, as he spoke about burning everything and how satisfying it felt to destroy. His eyes glinted with a sinister excitement at the thought of setting everything ablaze. The clash between Kuroboshi and the bully reached its peak, with tension crackling in the air like static. The bully glared at Kuroboshi, frustrated that he was still standing after everything. He saw Kuroboshi as a pest that just wouldn't go down, calling him stubborn and comparing him to a cockroach. His patience gone, the bully prepared to finish it once and for all. With fire blazing in his hands, he promised that this time Kuroboshi would be burned directly, with no chance to escape or fight back. The massive fireball surged forward, bright and violent, aimed straight at Kuroboshi. But something changed. Instead of fear, Kuroboshi showed a calm smile. Without hesitation, Kuroboshi grabbed the bully's arm as the fireball came at him. His grip was firm, his eyes focused. He believed that in the end, fights weren't always decided by strength or power, but by guts, the will to stand firm no matter what. The bully, annoyed that Kuroboshi was still resisting, shouted at him to stop struggling and accept defeat, to just get burned and end it. But Kuroboshi wasn't ready to give up. He kept his grip, his determination steady. Then something unexpected began to happen. From where his hand touched the bully's wrist, Kuroboshi felt his palm start to pull in the star element that fueled the fireball. Bit by bit, the dangerous flames began to fade, and the fireball vanished altogether. The bully stared, confused, as his attack disappeared before his eyes. In that moment, a small system screen appeared in front of Kuroboshi. It informed him that he had successfully acquired a tiny amount of star element, just enough to use for one jab. Kuroboshi recognized the familiar window, remembering how it had appeared back when he'd first used Jet at the hot spring. But this time, he hesitated. He knew Jet's power was overwhelming, and it wasn't something meant to be used against people lightly. The bully, still trying to make sense of what just happened, felt the loss of the star element that had been on his body. He demanded to know what Kuroboshi had done, his anger flaring again. Without waiting for an answer, he charged at Kuroboshi, pulling back his fist for a powerful punch, determined to crush him with brute strength. But Kuroboshi stayed calm. As the bully's punch came toward him, Kuroboshi raised his hand in defense. Just then, The mini black hole formed in his palm again, as if responding to the heat of the moment. Without him even consciously choosing to, a bright, focused beam of light blasted from his hand, surging forward and striking the bully directly. The force of the beam sent the bully flying backward, high into the air before he crashed down hard onto the ground, knocked out cold. The fight was over. A hush fell over the crowd for a brief second. Then whispers and cheers began to ripple through the watching students. The two girls who had been observing were impressed, saying it was just what they had expected from Kuroboshi. They recognized that he had successfully used the jet ability during the fight. The other students, many of whom had doubted him, were amazed that someone like him had managed to defeat an A-rank student. They began to murmur, wondering who Kuroboshi really was. After all, not just anyone could stand up to a ranker and win like that. Kuroboshi, however, stood there puzzled. He hadn't meant to use jet at all. The scene shifted to the temporary building of the 8th Special Force Training School, where a new chapter of Kuroboshi's journey was about to begin. The classroom buzzed with quiet whispers and curious glances. Today, a transfer student was joining their class. None other than Kuroboshi. The students had already heard about him, and word spread quickly. Many recognized him as the one who had defeated Hiwasahi earlier that very morning. The room filled with surprise and interest as they noticed Kuroboshi enter, drenched in sweat. His appearance only added to the mystery surrounding him. Some students whispered, wondering aloud why he looked so worn out. The answer, however, soon became clear. Nervous, but determined, Kuroboshi stepped forward to introduce himself. He apologized politely for being late and tried his best to make a good impression, even though he felt the weight of all those watching eyes. The teacher, however, wasn't about to let the morning's event slide so easily. As a punishment for the fight that had delayed him, Kuroboshi had already been made to run 10 full laps around the training ground before entering the classroom. Among the students watching him were Senri and Orin. Senri couldn't hide her amusement, finding it typical of Kuroboshi to be so entertaining from day one. Orin, on the other hand, was more surprised, still trying to believe that everything she was seeing was real. Senri approached Kuroboshi with her usual playful grin. She commented on how his first day had already become quite the spectacle, defeating an A-ranker in the morning and then being punished with 10 laps. It wasn't the quiet entrance most new students made. Kuroboshi admitted that after all that, he had also been summoned to the principal's office where he received a long and serious lecture. It had been a rough start to the day, and he confessed that it was nothing short of terrible. Orin pointed out that, considering the situation, he had actually gotten off lightly. Normally, a transfer student getting into a fight on their first day at Hachi school could have been expelled on the spot. But despite everything, she declared that she would take responsibility for watching over him from now on. She warned him firmly that if he got into trouble again, she wouldn't hesitate to stop him herself. Kuroboshi agreed, though the chill in her tone made him realize just how serious she was. Senri couldn't help but bring up the fight again, admitting that it had been exciting to watch. Her heart had even raced during the clash. She analyzed what she'd seen, explaining how Kuroboshi's alpha ability appeared to have 2 parts. The first was the black hole in his right arm, which could directly absorb star element from anything it touched. The second part was the jet that released the star element after it was absorbed. Senri shared that when she researched it, she discovered that real black holes also work in a similar way, sucking in matter and then ejecting it as a powerful jet. She suggested that maybe his alpha ability was modeled after that phenomenon. Kuroboshi thought about her words. Even though the ability was his, it didn't feel like something he truly controlled. It seemed to activate on its own, without his command. He wondered what he was supposed to do with a power that wouldn't listen to him. While Kuroboshi stood lost in thought, a boy approached him with a friendly smile. The boy asked if Kuroboshi was the one who had been called to clean the old school building. Kuroboshi nodded, a little surprised, and asked how the boy knew about that. The boy explained that he had noticed how hard Kuroboshi had worked. The old building had been left spotless, and he had thought it was impressive. That effort had left a mark on him, and he had remembered Kuroboshi because of it. Hearing this, Kuroboshi felt a rare moment of happiness. It meant a lot to him that someone had noticed and appreciated the hard work he had done, even when no one else seemed to care. He thanked the boy sincerely, feeling encouraged. The boy then introduced himself as Kani Abuku. He said he would be glad if they could be friends. Kuroboshi introduced himself too, mentioning that he didn't have a rank yet. But Kani wasn't bothered by that. He pointed out that Kuroboshi's ability was far more amazing than his own. Kani even suggested that Kuroboshi might become ranked in the future because of how strong his alpha ability seemed. Without warning, someone grabbed his head roughly from behind. It was the same bully who had clashed with him earlier that morning. Hiwashi, still covered in bandages from his humiliating defeat. The bully's face twisted with anger as he mocked Kuroboshi and Kani for getting along. To him, seeing an unranked student and a low-ranked one acting friendly at Hachi school felt like an insult. He sneered at them both, questioning when the school had become a place for such weaklings to gather and play as if they belonged. But before Hiwashi could cause more trouble, a powerful burst of magic energy shot across the room. A glowing beam hit him squarely, sending him crashing hard against a window. The force of the attack made him fly across the classroom like a rag doll. Kuroboshi stood frozen for a second, confused about what had just happened. It all happened so fast that he barely understood what he saw. One moment the bully had been right in front of him, and the next he was being hurled away like a toy. It became clear that another student had stepped in. This wasn't just any student, it was a second year, and not just any second year either. This was Ida Racen, a well-known A-ranker who looked down at the scene with cold eyes. He didn't hide his disgust as he scolded the bully. Ida made it clear how pathetic he thought Hiwashi was. Losing to an unranked guy that morning had already been shameful enough. But now, to see Hiwashi turning his frustration onto a lower-ranked student made him look even more pitiful in Ida's eyes. Ida listed out the bully's failures, from the disgrace of leading Class 1 in an attack against the strongest species only to have them all wiped out, to starting unnecessary fights in school. Hiwashi, lying in pain where he had fallen, could only think to himself in shock. He wondered why someone like Ida, a respected A-ranker and second year, was even here in the first place. The last thing he had expected was to be humiliated in front of everyone by someone so far above him in skill and rank. Ida didn't stop there. He walked over and kicked the bully again, as if to drive the point home. He explained why he was there. According to him, it was because the first years had proven themselves to be weak and worthless. Even though the principal had ordered him to keep an eye on them, he found the task boring and beneath him. Ida mocked the whole class, saying that while the strongest students, like Hyuga, were out fighting the real enemies and hunting down the dangerous strongest species, they were stuck dealing with pathetic excuses for fighters. In his view, Hiwashi's actions had been proof of just how hopeless the first years had become. They had no future, and their weakness disgusted him. As Ida spoke, the classroom fell silent. The tension was thick, and every student felt the weight of his words. All eyes were on him, and even those who might have normally spoken up kept quiet, knowing that arguing with someone like Ida was pointless. He was clearly in control, and no one dared challenge him. Then Ida announced something that made the entire class panic. He said there would be a selection exam right away. Every first-year student would have to take part in it. The exam wouldn't be a simple written test or some easy school challenge. They were to go out and hunt real Evas, dangerous creatures they had been training to fight, and not just any EVAs. Each student was expected to defeat at least 5 A-class EVAs or higher. That was the quota. Anyone who failed would lose their rank and be expelled from the school altogether. The classroom erupted in panic. Most of the students were B-rankers at best. The idea of fighting and defeating 5 A-class EVAs, creatures stronger than many of them had ever faced, was terrifying. Some students began to mutter that it was impossible. Finally, Ida turned his attention directly to Kuroboshi. His cold gaze locked onto him, pointing him out in front of everyone. Ida called him out as the one who had run 10 laps earlier that day, the new transfer student who had barely been accepted by the principal. But Ida said that didn't matter to him. He refused to acknowledge Kuroboshi. He went further, saying that Kuroboshi seemed suspicious. Ida hinted that Kuroboshi had been connected to the strange appearance of the strongest species during the earlier chaos, suggesting that he couldn't be trusted. The scene opens with all the students racing through an empty, crumbling town. Kuroboshi feels the fatigue building in his legs as he pushes himself forward, realizing he's been running non-stop since morning. Senri, keeping pace near him, encourages him to keep going. She remarks on how difficult it is to run from the school all the way to the exam venue. Kuroboshi notes that they've already been at it for about 3 hours, his breathing heavy as he scans the deserted streets. The town itself feels eerie. Buildings are in ruins, streets cracked and lifeless. Kuroboshi reflects on how this place, once full of people, now seems like a ghost town. There's no sign of life anywhere. Orin explains that they've already crossed outside the defense perimeter. Humanity had abandoned all areas apart from the large cities where the fight against the EVAs still rages. Now people only live in the big cities or on nearby farmlands. With EVAs active on land, sea, and air, travel between countries has nearly stopped. To make things worse, the star element interferes with communication, leaving cities isolated from one another. Their thoughts are interrupted by a loud shout from the second-year S-ranker, Ida Racen. His voice cuts through the morning air, demanding that everyone stop slowing down. He warns them that the exam venue is in sight now, and if they don't want to be expelled, they should sprint like their lives depend on it. The threat hangs heavy in the air, pushing everyone to give whatever energy they have left. Kuroboshi glances at Ida Racen. The S-ranker moves with effortless strength, his presence alone reminding Kuroboshi of the gap between them. A thought crosses Kuroboshi's mind. Ever since the encounter with the strongest species, nothing major had happened. But he knew the danger wasn't over. If word about what truly happened with the strongest species ever got out, he might be in serious trouble. There were forces that wouldn't hesitate to silence him. Seeing that Orin and Senri are already ahead of him, Kuroboshi pushes himself harder, determined not to fall behind. The group finally reaches the edge of a forest, where the exam venue is supposed to be. The students gather, slightly confused, as the place looks like nothing more than a stretch of trees. Some wonder aloud if this is really where the exam will happen. The dense forest doesn't seem like much, but the tension suggests otherwise. Kuroboshi hopes for a moment to catch his breath after the long run, his body aching. Orin turns to him, genuinely surprised that he managed to keep pace with them. She praises his effort, pointing out that they train daily, and yet he kept up. There's a hint of pride in her voice, happy to see how far he's come. Kuroboshi explains that because he lacked an alpha ability for so long, he made sure to focus on building his stamina so he wouldn't be left behind in situations like this. All that hard work was finally paying off. Orin acknowledges his determination with a warm expression, finding his persistence admirable. As soon as the students arrived at the exam site, the second-year instructor wasted no time gathering them together. His loud voice echoed through the forest as he ordered everyone to assemble. Without letting them catch their breath, He explained the rules of the selection exam. The task was brutal in its simplicity. They were to enter the mountain ahead and hunt down at least 5 A-class evas each. The instructor made it clear that the mountain was filled with these monsters, and no one was to return until the job was done. Failure meant losing their rank and being expelled on the spot. The students immediately felt the weight of the challenge. Without hesitation, he snatched the student's rank badge and crushed it, expelling him on the spot. His movements had been so fast that Kuroboshi didn't even see him act. The realization struck Kuroboshi. The instructor's speed and strength were on a whole different level. The instructor then addressed the entire group again, his voice cold and merciless. He reminded them that on a real battlefield, the enemy wouldn't adjust its strength to match theirs. The recent attack by the strongest species should have taught them that. He demanded that they use whatever alpha abilities or skills they had, no matter how weak, to protect those stronger than themselves. If they couldn't do that, then they might as well die out here. His harsh words rang in everyone's ears, pushing them to act. Motivated by fear and determination, the students scattered, dashing toward the mountain. They repeated to themselves that they could do this, clinging to whatever courage they had left. Kuroboshi followed, swept up in the rush of bodies charging toward danger. Though his mind was full of doubts, he knew there was no choice but to move forward. Meanwhile, Orin and Senri stood back for a moment, watching the others disappear into the forest. They wondered aloud how many of their classmates would even be able to meet the quota. Orin explained that one A-class monster was considered the combat equivalent of a tank, while a B-ranker was only as strong as a regular soldier. The gap was enormous. Senri admitted that it felt like an impossible challenge and shared her worry about how many would return alive. Orin, always supportive, said she'd do everything she could to help make sure no one died during this test. Before they could move, the instructor called them out, telling them they had a special exam to complete with him. The news took both girls by surprise. Neither had expected to be singled out, and now they had no choice but to stay behind and face whatever the instructor had planned. Back in the forest, Kuroboshi kept running. The mini-dragon spoke up, its voice brimming with excitement. The creature clearly found the idea of hunting thrilling. It offered again to lend its power, saying it was bored and itching for action. But Kuroboshi, determined to rely on his own strength, refused. He reminded the mini-dragon that this time he wanted to handle things without outside help. The mini-dragon only smirked, hinting that it was ready to assist if Kuroboshi ever changed his mind. Its tone was playful, but Kuroboshi couldn't shake the feeling that there was always something suspicious about the creature's eagerness. Suddenly, the ground beneath him trembled. Kuroboshi froze for a second, startled by the sudden quake. The shaking grew stronger, and from behind a cluster of trees, he spotted the source. A massive boar-like monster charged out of the woods, its size and power undeniable. The beast appeared in front of another student, ready to attack. Kuroboshi stared at the giant creature, realizing just how dangerous this exam would truly be.